let's talk to Lucas. Hey, Lucas, you are live with Promise and Matt. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Good to talk to you guys. I hope you're good as well.
Yeah, thanks. So, what did you want to talk to us about specifically?
Uh, uh, I've been an atheist for most of my life. I used to believe when I was until around 15 years old. Then I became an atheist, and I remained an atheist until now. Actually, like the beginning of this year. So I my stance right now is that I don't believe that anyone can prove God objectively. But I am in a very tough spot to on what if okay, so my question is it reasonable to believe in God with our own experience, for example, not objectively? Let's say that you make a proposition to God, like you ask him to prove himself to you through reasons that or through means that he can prove himself only to you. And then let's say this happens. At what point an individual can reasonably believe in God through anecdote evidence?
If you're asking me personally, I can't think of any anecdotal circumstances that I would consider reasonable from the outside. I can understand because I used to do the same thing, and that's why I used to believe when you're in it, these anecdotes can feel like the universe. Basically, it can feel like that is fact, and that because it happened to you, that must mean that it's true and that you're completely perceiving it accurately and that it's fact. But my perspective would be that that's not a good reason. Matt?
But I'm sure there has to be a line, right? Because let's say that I do believe, like at face value, I share the same view as you, but at some point, let's say that God tells only you, for example, that a lot of events are going to happen, let's say around the world, and then let's say 100 events does happen like that, only to you. You receive this information only to you, and you're seeing confirmation. Like, do you guys agree or share my opinion that there must be a line where things just become so extraordinarily
No,
unlikely that it becomes reasonable then to start believing in God?
no.
I would
And
start.
when you
I would start
started this,
thinking a million other things before that. Sorry, Matt. You continue.
no, it's fine. It's when you started these, you said, if God tells only you, how do you know that God told you anything? If you know that God told you something, then you've already settled the issue and you know that God exists. It's like saying, if Promise gave me 10 predictions that came true, would that prove that Promise existed? The predictions are irrelevant. The fact that Promise gave me those predictions is the confirmation. So you can't begin by saying, if God tells you things, if you're trying to demonstrate that God exists. What you should be saying is,
Sure.
if I think God has told me things and they come true, would that confirm that I was right that God told me things? And the answer is absolutely not. The claim that
Uh,
there's a God speaking to you is something that you would need to come up with a way to demonstrate is true. The mere fact that you think you're getting messages and they are coming through consistent doesn't in any way tell you if you're actually getting messages or how or why they're coming true.
Maybe I should just share what actually happened to me. Like I said, I
Okay.
was an atheist, and then yeah. So
Can I, real
what
quick
actually
before
happened?
that,
Sure.
do you feel comfortable telling us which God it is that you currently believe in, or is this just a general God?
It's a general God. It did have the situation I'm about to share did happen in a church, a Christian church, but at this point, at least I'm not making any connection.
I don't know
Okay,
why that
gotcha. Sorry, go
location would
ahead.
make a difference, but go ahead. So you were an atheist, and what happened?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not, to be completely honest, I'm not even sure where I stand right now, but I'm full of doubts. So, okay, at the big, I mean, August of uh, the 24. I was in the hospital with my uncle, and he was very Christian and everything, and he kept just asking me to go to church and asking me all the time. And I didn't want to go because I didn't see any reason. And after he passed away, as a way to like pay respect for his wishes, I went to church, and I just went normally. Wasn't expecting anything, and I just I don't know. I thought to myself, like, if God exists, like, please demonstrate in some way. I wouldn't even be sure what way could God just prove himself to the person. But then, and of course, and that's why I say it's an anecdote situation, because I sit there in the church waiting for the pastor to come in, and then I hear a voice. It, again, I know how it sounds, but I hear a very clear voice saying, "I'm gonna speak your name so you know I'm talking to you." And then the pastor goes ahead and says, "Open your books in Lucas 17, 21, 20, 21, I think." And the passage even that's my name. So, and the passage was even related to something that I always question. And after that, in the same week, to be honest, I met, and again, that's something completely personal. So I was in a extremely bad situation. I live here in Brazil, so here we deal with a lot of criminality, a lot of stuff. I got myself in so many troubles, with broken relationships, depression. Even I was suicidal for a big amount of time in my life. I was in massive debt and a lot of problems, healthy problems, a lot of stuff. And within that same week, I met a person that, and she's from the United States. That's like some unbelievable, at least from my experience, story to me. So I met this person online. We became really good friends, and this person just helped me out in everything that I was struggling in my life. And but again, that is what happened to me, and I'm not even saying that proves God. But my only question is, let's say that events like this kept happening and all of that stuff. Let's say you ask God for a further proof for yourself, and let's say that this God fulfills it. I'm not even pointing out to a specific God or a specific creature. I don't know, but something. Let's say it at what point it is reasonable to assume there's something out there doing something to you specifically, if this happened to you, to a person.
I I just have to be totally honest and say everything you told me so far, none of it sounded even remotely um I understand because when I was a Christian, I defaulted to crediting God as the source for when things like that would happen. But you said that
Hmm.
you were grieving, which by the way, I'm so sorry for your loss. And when we grieve,
Thank you.
our brains are in all kinds of disarray. So you're grieving, you're in church, you haven't been there in a long time or ever. I can't remember what you said. And then you are asking for something out of this grief. You're looking for something. And that's what us humans do. We look for things. We look for patterns. We look for answers. We look for things. So you're looking for something and you hear a voice in your head. At least this is what your memory tells you. You hear a voice in your head that says, I'm going to say your name. And then a pastor says something about the book of Lucas. Well, that's one of the most popular books of the Bible to preach out of. So already there was a large chance that the pastor was going to say that. And I understand that in that moment, it probably felt like, oh, like this is a thing. But to me, that's still deeply uninteresting as far as reasons to believe that an entire God exists. The other thing with having somebody come into your life to help you, that's amazing. Love that for you. But again, you're going through a rough time, you're looking for something, and then, oh, there's the answer. Because what happens if that friendship blows up and turns into this awful thing in your life? Now, what are you going to say? That was Satan that brought her into your life, So to me, it's already just very normal, natural human things happening, maybe coincidence at most. And then we're assigning it to, therefore, God, because you're looking for something when you're grieving. And I get that, I understand it. But none of that now. Like, I have coincidences and all kinds of crazy stuff like that happen to me all the time. I have leftover from my superstitious Christian days. I have a favorite number, and guess what? I still see it all the time. I sign my book deal and I look up and there's my favorite number. I go to a hotel, they put me in my favorite number and all that. And I used to say, oh, look, this is because this is what God wants me to do and God is showing me. And now I know I'm looking for my favorite number all the time because it's my favorite number. And that's what our brains do. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling. Matt, do you have a way to actually make sense of what I just said?
One of the things is, if we're saying, hey, God can give me a sign, that's a very vague claim. And what it does is it sets it up so that you can interpret anything that happens in any way you want and say that, ooh, this could have been the sign that I asked for. So instead of being vague about it, if in fact some God exists and he's genuinely giving you signs, then clearly there's no reason for that God to hide. So start with something very specific and extraordinary and say, okay, God, you've been sending me signs and it's been kind of vague and I want to make sure I'm clear. So make my cell phone levitate off of the table in front of me, hover at eye level, turn it on, start recording. And then in the same voice that I heard the other day when you said you were going to say my name, record a message telling me who you are and what you want. That would be a good start, because these sorts of things have to be answerable by a specific set of circumstances, not subject to interpretation. And if there's a God that wants to communicate with you, it shouldn't feel any need to be vague or coy or set things up so that you can interpret it and maybe get it wrong. If God wants to talk to you, God has an obligation to be clear and not just give you a whiff of a hint that maybe he's there.
I understand that, but let's say that that does happen. So you're saying that
When that
would
happens,
be
call me back.
Yeah, no, that's exactly my point. I'm just wondering if at some point, and again, your example is very good. So in your case, it would be something not vague. I see the value on that. I was debating with the initial uh, question of if at any point, and again, the point could be something specific, as you say, but at that point, then you would say it's reasonable to start believing in God.
No,
For that
I would
person,
say
it's not like he's
no.
gonna.
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I'm suggesting. I would say the flaw you're making is by starting with something that can't possibly demonstrate what you're doing. And so once we get to something more specific, that would at least be a good start. But the thing is, let's say that I'm here alone and I say that, and my cell phone levitates up in the air and starts recording and records a voice that says, "Hi, I'm God. Here's what I'd like you to know about me," and then stops the recording. I would have something incredible happen for which I don't have an explanation. And then it becomes, okay, God, since, or whoever you are, if you want me to believe that's you, why aren't you doing this to everyone, for everyone, on the entire planet, so that there is no debate or discussion? Like, Promise and I do this show. It's possible that Promise is an entirely AI generated AV experience that is just being piped at me and at you. But if somebody said, how would you demonstrate that Promise is real? Well, I would do something that the Trump administration is trying to avoid, which is this notion of habeas corpus, produce the corpse, produce the body. I would present in person Promise to the person who was asking, if at all possible. Or find, there's any number of ways to demonstrate. When I was a kid, people would be like, oh, I have a girlfriend. She goes to a different school. You don't know her. And the presumption is you're almost certainly lying. and you're trying to avoid the embarrassment of saying that you don't have a girlfriend. And yet,
Mm.
on some occasions, I had friends who did date girls that went to other high schools, and I met them. If God is in a position where he is willing to demonstrate conclusively to any individual that he exists, the next question becomes, why isn't God doing this for everyone? Why are we sitting around? Why would he have to give you special evidence that only applies to you so that you could call in and tell me? Because even if you have a good reason, even if God has completely revealed itself to you in a way where you are absolutely confident that he exists, that revelation is useless to the rest of us. To quote Hume, revelation is necessarily first person, and to everyone else, it's hearsay. And so, why is a Damascus Road experience good enough for Saul, but not the rest of us? The rest of us have to go on a story of a hint of a report of a Damascus Road experience, or, hey, I think I'm going to say your name. I'm a little worried when you say you heard a voice because
Yeah, me too.
hearing voices is a potentially scary thing. It may not be the worst thing ever, but I would definitely seek counseling and therapy first to find out, is there something potentially else wrong here before I put any more stock in hearing voices. But the coincidences that you're stacking up of, hey, I went to a church, the pastor came out and said, open to Luke 17:21 or whatever it was, and that same week I met a woman and it changed my life. Um, that's all really cool. I don't understand how any of this is in any way even a speck of a hint of a confirmation that there's a God. And so God is either hiding, in which case he's not going to do the things that let you know he exists, or he's not hiding, in which case he should just tell everybody he exists. This tap dance of, if I close one eye and I tilt my head and I think about it and I look at it, it kind of could maybe look something like or sound something like something I think might be a god. It's almost as vague as Void's notion from the last caller about I feel is some sort of object that seems to be in supreme importance. So my big thing, which I mentioned in the debate yesterday, is this: I have no idea what piece of evidence could ever convince me that an all knowing, all powerful, morally perfect being exists? I personally think that there are no human beings who are capable of telling the difference between an all knowing, all powerful, morally perfect being and something else that is just way more powerful than us, way more knowledgeable than us, and perhaps morally better than us. I don't know how you get to those ideals of perfection. And so Arthur C. Clarke famously said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, which means everything that you don't know could be magic, could be a god, could be technology that you just don't understand. And I don't know have any way to tell the difference, and I don't know that anybody else does either. But if there's a god, that god should easily be able to cut through all the bullshit and say, boom, here's how you tell that I'm God. And that never happens.
That's true, and I agree with your. What do you think about an evidence to a all good, all powerful God? I share your view there as well. I'm still a little bit confused to the specific because I'm not here to confirm that I uh, uh, proved God to myself or anything, and it's n- not at all related to an objective proof of God. My question, and I'm not sure because you said if God reveals Himself completely to a person, that still is not sufficient. It's not useful to the rest of humanity, and I agree 100%. But my question is, but for that, let's say just for that person, is it reasonable for that person? Let's say that God revealed Himself completely to that person in all of the ways that person could imagine to ask for other than
Uh,
to be something objective. Is would then that the belief of that person, is it reasonable then?
Maybe, but the way I
That
would test that. So, like, if God revealed Himself to me privately and gave me nothing testable, then now we're in a situation where God exists as far as I can tell, and God wants me to know he exists. And God is communicating with me. And so then I have an obligation to figure out, am I merely delusional and inventing this, or is this something else I don't understand, or is there actually good reason to believe in God? So the first question that I should ask God is, why aren't you revealing yourself to everybody else the way you reveal yourself to me? And you cannot accept, I've got my reasons and I'm not going to tell you, because that's the shit your brain would make up. If God's revealing himself to you in such a way that you can know he exists, why isn't this happening for others? And if God can't tell you, then you're probably deceiving yourself. Either way, that God is irrelevant. If I can't tell the difference between a delusion and reality, I don't get to bring him up.
I understand. I understand. Wow. I agree with
If you
what you're
find that you
saying.
have good reason to believe in God and God's answering your questions, ask him why he's not revealing himself to me.
Yes, everything in that case would depend on the quality of the answers to those contradictions or
It's a way of
doubts.
removing the subjective. It is one of the core principles of scientific processes that what we need is independent verification. And so instead of saying, hey, God, I'm really struggling here, reveal yourself to me, please, and then looking for the thing, it should be, hey, God, I'm really struggling here right now. Reveal yourself to me and promise and our audience right now. And if he does one and not the other, I would say, now, if he reveals himself to promise and not me, then I can't claim it's my delusion, but it could be promise's delusion.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucas, the other thing I would say here is, if there's a God and that God wants you to know it exists, then why would it only give you enough that you're calling an atheist call-in show to say, kind of like, what do you think about this? Do you think this is good enough for you? You know what I mean? Like, I think if a God was really, truly revealing itself to you in a way that it wanted to be known, you wouldn't have questions. You wouldn't have doubts. That God would have revealed itself. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Maybe I could give a little bit more of what's actually like the things I've been thinking, because I don't think I'll have another opportunity like this in my life. So I would. Can I share a little bit of what I'm making of this, my own conclusions?
If you can keep it really brief and like,
Keep it pretty brief.
Yeah, because we've got a bunch of other theists on hold. But yeah, make it maybe like make some specific points for us.
Yeah. So the way I think, and to answer some of those questions, and again, that's my conclusion. So I think that God is, again, the word God, it's something like Matt said, it's something more powerful than us. It's not necessarily all powerful, all good, all knowing. That is, I don't believe that. And again, there's not even a way to prove it. So, but I do believe that it's kind of inevitable that a being like this might exist, just because the universe is infinite. And
why?
Even within even within our,
sorry.
Yeah,
no, I
maybe
don't see how it's inevitable. Just because Usain Bolt runs faster than me doesn't mean that somebody can run faster than the speed of light. You're basically suggesting that because one thing is faster than another, something can be infinitely fast. And there may be limits to that entirely, not the least of which is what infinity is into quantity. And so, there must always be something more. No, there can actually be limits. There may be a boundary to how much space there is.
I agree with that. That's why I don't believe on all powerful God and all knowing. We run even into logical contradictions. So, but I do believe that if God, I believe at some point in the multiverse or whatever it exists, a being like that already existed. And
Why? You have
for my
you have zero justification for this. We don't even know if there is a multiverse. You don't have any way to explore it.
That's true.
All you're doing is sitting around going, if Usain Bolt's faster than Matt, then somebody must at least run at a speed that seems impossible to humans. Well, you might be right, you might not. There's no reason to think you are in
Exactly.
fact right.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, but I do think that there is, again, my whole point here is that there's uh, uh, a possibility
No,
of
there's
being
not.
reasonable to someone to believe like it in from their own
That's
experience,
not
not objective.
necessarily the case. You can't declare something is possible. You have to demonstrate that it's possible. And one of the things you could do is say, God, what should I say to Matt and Promise to convince them? That would be great because then you could get a message directly from God, bring it to us, and if it convinces us, then God told you the truth and we would then begin to work on something. But if it doesn't convince us, that means that God didn't tell you the truth. Why doesn't that happen? Why doesn't
Yeah,
God tell
so
you what you're thinking of?
yeah, I do think, and again, that's the conclusions I've been running from my head, given what happened to me. But as a possibility, I'm not even saying I that's what I believe right now. But I do think, for example, because one of the first questions we all make if we start believing in God is, okay, why all this? Why create humans? So there must there has to be a reason. Let's just assume the possibility that God does exist and He
No,
created humans. So there is a reason that we have to be here to accomplish something, and
no, we don't.
that's something. Yeah, exactly. It's about, I'm speaking
Well, how can you say no, no,
in a
stop,
perspective,
stop, stop, stop? You
right?
can't say we have to be here to accomplish something. And then when I say no, we don't, you can't say exactly. I can't disagree with you and then
I
have you say exactly as if I just agreed with you.
Yeah, because I'm not saying that that's a fact that therefore God believes. I'm trying to answer one of the why God doesn't reveal Himself to everyone. I'm trying to answer that
I
with
don't need
this
you to make
conclusion, but
excuses for God. I need you to justify God. I am completely uninterested in you trying to figure out why God isn't revealing himself. Couldn't possibly care less.
did you watch the that movie God Ex Machina?
Yeah,
The conclusion here is
but
kind
Lucas,
of close to
I'm gonna let
it's
you
fine.
know that since we were already close to the end of the call, so I want to keep things like short points here. And it sounds like you're still kind of back to your original point, which is that you're trying to, or whatever, I don't know if we're calling it a point, but um where you want to know basically when is it reasonable to start believing in a god. And I think Matt and I have been pretty clear that we don't think these anecdotal things, because basically for us to agree with anything you're saying so far, we would have to concede to so many points that neither of us are willing to concede to already. Even the idea of like, well, if it is possible for there to be a god and there is a god, and then there must be a reason that we're here. I can't even agree with that, because I can't even agree that if a God created things, that there was any kind of purpose in a way that we would understand. So I think we're reaching, unless there's something else Matt wants to ask about, I think we're reaching kind of the end of
No,
of
once
uh
you start asking me
That's
if I've
good.
of
seen a
our call.
movie, we're done.
Yeah, yeah. That no, that's good. I thank both of you for your time.
Yeah, of course. And you can always call back. We take these callers on all of our shows. So
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
thanks, Lucas. Have a great day.
You guys as well. Bye.
You too.
Yeah, the movie thing, especially I was homeschooled. The likelihood that I've seen a movie that somebody's going to reference, this is already going to not help people. So,
Well,
uh,
I'm a movie and TV fan. I've watched all kinds of stuff. There are they're pieces of art and they can exist to potentially teach us something. So it's not like I'm just saying don't ever reference a movie or whatever else. It's just we already addressed everything. And then it's like, But yes, if a God exists, then we must be here for a reason. No. Well, it must be possible that no, you don't get to assert possibility. A God may in fact be impossible. It may be impossible for us to ever know whether a God exists, and it may be impossible for us to know whether or not it's possible for a God to exist. And so this is all desperate flailing around to find some way to make this prospect to keep a light on somewhere in that. Ooh, let me just give me just a little bit. No, I'm not going to keep the door open for Jesus or Muhammad or Yahweh or Allah or Zeus, or list whatever deity or prophet you want as if they are real. Now, I have no problem at all that there might be people who believe this. I have no problem with the notion that, Muhammad isn't God and may have, almost certainly existed or whatever. That's not the point. The point is, if God exists and has a message for us, he can tell me himself, and he can even tell me through you, but not by saying, well, I'm trying to find a really good way to phrase this. Have you seen this movie? Maybe if you started that way, but at the end of a lengthy conversation, it just is an immediate, you're just flailing to find some way to keep this
Yeah.
conversation going. And it's not,
Yeah.
there's nothing bad.
Which, to his credit, he did say that he was just excited that he was able to have this conversation. So, which I appreciate.
Cool.
But yeah, that's probably the time to call another show for that part. On that note, shall we talk to another theist?
Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, Pokemon Master and Executive Producer on The Line. Would you like to support a specific show on The Line or The Line in general? There are special tiers on our Patreon and in our channel memberships. You can do just that. By the way, you could consider leaving a super thanks down below. You could also like, subscribe, and leave a regular comment. All of these are great. Now, I'm going to get back to crushing loneliness, but while I do that, why don't you check out one of these?